Welcome to our Leith Lives podcast series. In this episode, we talk to Anrew Grant, no stranger to the Thelma podcast studio, about his time at Leith Nautical College in Commercial Street. He was here from August 1953 to July 1954. He also talks about being on the training ship Dolphin. Enjoy. Once again, it's great to have Anrew Grant in the studio for our fifth programme?
Fifth programme, that's right.
Yes, and we're going to be talking about what today, Anrew?
Well, it's basically about the Dolphin, but our training on the Dolphin during the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
But I'll have to do other things as well,
Cool.
because before we even start talking about the Dolphin, we should look at the history of seagoing in Leith for a start. The training side of it, possibly. So anyway, first of all, there is a great history of seagoing in Leith worldwide, but that would take a long, long time to go over. However, what is known is that a Greek explorer and astronomer called Pythas sailed round the British Isles in 325 BC, a long time ago. And then the Romans arrived in the 1st century AD, coming by sea as well as by land, and setting up forts at the mouths of the Esk and Cramond. And I think there must have been one in Leith as well. There were 3 estuaries, and all very close together, but unfortunately never been found yet. Leith during the next few centuries gradually became a trading port, with the continent in particular exporting fish and importing wine as examples of some of the products they used. Now, jump up to the 16th century. Go through time quickly here. The 16th century, and well, that was King James was on the throne, and he was quite a great philanthropist who, among other accomplishments, saw the need for sea power, so decided to build a navy in Scotland. He recruited shipwrights and other technical skilled maritime experts from the likes of Portugal and the Low Countries, the former having already made voyages round the world, Vasco da Gama, etc. The result was construction of the Great Michael in New Haven, and also such European seamen as there were taught the seagoing Scots a lesson in ship handling and navigation. However, the Great Michael saw little service, and after the king was killed at Flodden, she was sold to the French, who didn't use her, and she rotted away in Brest. Her cannons were only fired once for a practice.
What a waste.
Terrible. Well, anyway, trading in Leith prospered, and the organisation of the Corporation of Trinity House was formed to support seamen and their families. This would make another good programme for you about Trinity House. They built a school and a hospital near where Trinity House now stands, and in 1680 the corporation introduced maritime training in the curriculum that they had. This expanded and to include the certification of pilots throughout the whole of Scotland, so not just Leith. At the same time, nautical training began to be offered in many other ports in Scotland. Most of the training was for officers. Deckhands tend to get trained on board. But the nautical training, and it was offered in other ports like Dundee and Aberdeen and Glasgow, the 3 main cities, was there all the time. In Leith, the provost, the provost who was the provost of Leith, not of the combined Edinburgh and Leith, but the provost of Leith, and others planned to open a navigation school, and so in 1855 this was opened in the premises of the Mariners' Church in Commercial Street, just across the road from here. Right? Following staffing issues and the threat to close the school, one James Boland, a young mathematician and an astronomer of 21 years of age, was appointed as a principal to the post. And he held that post for some 60 years and all, right till he was an old man. Boland was instrumental in creating technical education for all at the school and later for other schools and universities, and introduced engineering classes and communication classes. He also campaigned successfully for the construction of a nautical college to accommodate the growing number of students on the courses. There was much negotiation and fundraising, but in the end of 1902, the college was built. And that still stands. The building does, not the college. This was the first purpose-built nautical school in Scotland. As I say, it's still standing in Commercial Street, but obviously is just offices at the moment. However, he started the training was exemplary, and he continued in the role until 1967. Anyway, if you want to know the success of that building, there's a report in the Leith Nautical College annual report, 1917. I'm going back a wee bit, but I want to put that in. It says, further in the report showed that there had been 151 successful candidates at the Board of Trade and the other official examinations. In all, 26,991 lessons were made, varying from 1 hour to 3 hours, and a lot of boys went to sea. Now that's 17, which is during the First World War. So there was issues related to that. So anyway, just carry on. Excuse me to have a wee.
Yes, of course.
Okay, that's good. It was 2 years after that the Dolphin was berthed in the West Old Dock in Leith, with the purpose of training boys who wanted to go to sea, but mainly as a boys' club.
Right.
However, much of her history and that of the college all come a bit later. To look at the Dolphin itself, she was a barque of some 195 tons and was constructed in Middlesbrough in 1882. Her hull was comprised of 4 inches of mahogany and 2 inches of teak and water cladding below the waterline. Tremendous amount of trees. When they said that the Great Michael used all the oaks and Fife, wasn't it? That's one of the statements. But you can imagine this one too. It must have been down Yorkshire that did that. In addition to her masts and sails, she had an auxiliary steam engine. As a ship of the British Navy, she joined the Mediterranean fleet and went to the Red Sea, where she was involved in the defence of Suakin. Excuse me if I got the pronunciation wrong. Where British troops were engaged with the Sudanese. Thereafter, she patrolled the Red Sea to apprehend slave trading vessels. So it's been going on a long time. Thereafter, she patrolled the Red Sea and apprehended a lot of these slaving dhows from the Arabian Peninsula. Thereafter, she patrolled. She returned for service. She returned to the UK and went to Sheerness, where she became part of the sail training squadron of the Royal Navy. Some 10 years later, she became part of the submarine training depot. So submarines were coming. That's in, what's that, about long before the Second World War anyway. In 1924, she was put up for sale and bought by Sir Donald Pollock and Commander J. Robinson, who were wanting to use her for a boys' club in Leith, as I've just mentioned. Being towed to Leith, she was nearly sunk, but had to be beached at Fisher Row. Several months later, she was again towed to Leith, but went on to Rosyth for a full refit. Then, in 1928, she returned to Leith and took up residence in the West Old Dock. And you'll see photographs of here in the museum of her actually sitting in that West Old Dock.
Yeah.
Particularly the Claver House, I think, was next door, and other ships were still using the dock for cargoes,
Right.
even the 50s.
Right.
She was used, as I said, as a boys' club and the training of those that wanted a nautical career in the evening. During the Second World War, recreational activities ceased, but in 1944 the ship was acquired by Leith Nautical College to provide, first of all, training accommodation for students, but also by 1946 she was used for other courses like catering, as well as seamanship and a whole load of other things. And this continued up to the 1965 when the West Old Dock was filled in. That's where the hotel stands now, just as you come in the gate.
Yeah.
And she was transferred to the East Old Dock, but only for a short period before being tied up beside Berners Street Bridge when that other dock was filled in.
Oh, right.
The problems about her was that, she was a ship and gave us a lot of training on board, but they tried to get the Dolphin actually made into a hotel for boys, but they got no response back.
Right.
But around this time, following there had been a reduction of British merchant fleet, and I experienced that when I went to sea. And in consequence, an increase for the need of personal training to man ships. As a result, Leith Nautical College was thriving with student intake. Following 7 years of discussion with the authorities, they decided that a new college for nautical studies was required as part of the review of technical studies and a wider platform, shall we say. So the result of that was a construction of the modern college on Milton Road, with accommodation for seagoing students, many from overseas as well as local people, and in doing so, construction of a large ship's bridge and planetarium were made on the top floor. That still exists.
Wow.
Sometimes you can get into the college as it stands and you can go up and see that.
Wow.
Have to give you permission.
Yeah.
A casualty of the organisation, however, was that the Dolphin was no longer required, and she was towed back out into the Forth and up to Bo'ness for the breaker's yard. The copper on her bottom was very valuable.
Yeah.
A lot of people, including those who had received training aboard the ship, thought she should have been taken out into the Forth and set alight and
really?
given
Like
her
a Viking burial.
Yeah, given it precisely. But also throughout Scotland there are colleges, I've mentioned earlier, the ones in Leith and Glasgow and other Aberdeen, Dundee. The Scottish Education Department in Cosla set up a commission to review nautical studies over the period, considering there were too many courses, and a decline in the number of students. This was not the case in Leith, however. Their conclusions were to rationalise the provision of these courses into one site, and they chose Glasgow. Now, there are hundreds of courses going on here for nautical training. Why they chose Glasgow, I'll never know. But anyway, that's what they did. At the time, this appeared ridiculous as Leith Nautical College was expanding a full range of courses. Followed this, the SED and COSLA said that Leith should reduce teaching to 37 of its courses. There were a number of other recommendations to follow. But despite objections from the staff, students, male and female, because women are going to sea latterly, ship owners and others, there was a result of the closure of nautical studies in Leith. That's here in Leith and at Jewel-Nesk. In 1983, the college was given over to Jewel-Nesk Valley College, and maritime education for the town, which had been provided for many centuries, came to an end. As I say, politics had decreed the end of an era that began with James IV.
Yeah.
So there's some background to it, the college and the Dolphin.
Yes, yeah.
But anyway, on a personal note, looking at what happened, in 1953, that's a long time ago, isn't it?
It is, I'm afraid, yes.
In 1953, I had an interview with Dr. Fisher, who was then the principal, at the meeting attended by my cousin's husband, who happened to be a master in the Curry line. So that's what gave me the idea of going to sea. I mean, everybody thought, you're mad. But, I suppose they were right in a way. But anyway, my mother was there. So anyway, after being interviewed, he offered me a course in the late 1953 cadet intake course. That was 1953 to 54.
So how old were you?
15.
15,
right. Okay. Yeah, that's when people run away to sea, isn't it? They say at 15 years.
That or the circus.
Yeah, or the circus, that's right. So anyway, he gave me a list of books and uniform and work clothes. The books included things like Norrie's nautical tables, which were about 2 inches thick, as the other one, Mount Nicholson's size guide, that told you everything about navigation, and all sorts of other books. Yeah. Quite expensive they were too, unfortunately. But anyway, my mother and father, they were prepared to do it, and I thought, well, I better make something of this after the money they've spent. At the time, Captain Tate was in charge. Great man, actually. I've got a lot of respect for him and the others in that. And he taught us navigation and mathematics. And then there was Willie Sutherland, who was trained us on all aspects of seamanship. Right. And a Captain Johnson and a Lieutenant Moffat, who taught navigation as well, maths and radar, because radar was now coming more and more popular on ships at that time. Yeah. But we did a lot of basic things, like cleaning the ship.
Of course. She
had teak decks, so I had to holystone them. That's like a holystone is like a big sandstone, about the size of a brick, or maybe bigger than that, attached to a handle, and you pushed it up and down the decks in line with the grain. And that got rid of the muck and smoothed the decks off, so you could walk around in your bare feet.
Wow.
So that was one. Then there was washing down all the outside of the ship as well as inside. Right. You went over the outside in bosun's chairs, which are little planks of wood held by rope. Cleaned it all. We also painted there as well. Painted a hull periodically. So this was all sort of basic things, but things that we would have to do at sea anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Then there was other things like boat work. For instance, we were all taught to row and sail, but the sailing was on lifeboats, which are a wee bit different to the ones you see up in Granton or whatever at the moment.
Of course.
But it's just a part of the health and safety thing. You had to know how to do this. Yeah. And there was also the lifeboat training every week. We had to do lifeboat training, and there's a few photographs in the press showing us doing it. So that's. But the other thing, we had a big cutter up several tons in weight, it felt, and we rowed across to Burnt Island and back in a day.
Wow.
That was 12 of us, 10 rowing and 2 in relief, of which every so often and Willie Sutherland he was in charge of it.
Right.
But that boat as well took us out to visit the George Stagg. Right. That training ship, it was shown here in just about 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we rode out there and had a tour around the ship, and it was very, very interesting. Yeah. And I have my photograph taken on the bowsprit.
As we've got, yeah.
Yes. So when she was in docks just a couple of weeks ago, I thought, I'm going down to see her again. You couldn't get near her, but we followed this workman who went through an emergency dock. So my wife and I went down, and there was a one of the officers and two of the cadets standing at the gangplank. So I told them and gave them a copy of this photograph.
Yeah.
None of them were born with that.
No.
So anyway, they said, "You want to see Rounder again?" So I got on her when she was here, and she wasn't open to the public.
Oh, brilliant.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
But a lot of the navigation equipment is completely different from what I used at sea. It was all radar and satellite navigation and things. They would do it on that too. And that's what I talked about.
Yeah.
And I was talking to them about how we navigated with charts and sextant and what's that. But anyway, in addition to these sort of things, we had to learn signalling quite a lot. Not the radio signals, but signalling like the semaphore. I had to learn the Morse code off by heart, where in the dark classroom on board the Dolphin, they used to give us messages and just little flashes of light, and you had to write down what the message said. Some of them were nice, some of them were not so nice. But anyway, we got that, because that's just like being at sea.
Yeah.
If you communicate between two ships and you're using the Morse code, you had to be able to read it very quickly. Then there was the practice in sending and receive the international flags.
Right.
So, like if you go anywhere, you have to put that red flag on the ship.
Yeah.
And also the international flags, which depict numbers and letters. Right. And every ship has got 4 letters. GNFQ, I think, was the one that I had, or the first ship I was on. It's these sort of things you can remember.
Yeah,
so you put the GNFQ flags up to show them who you were before you got into port.
Right.
But that's changed now, and I've all got radio contact and things like that.
Yeah.
And if you look in the Britannia, all these flags that are over the Britannia are part of the international code.
Right.
So some are numbers, some are letters.
Right.
So you've got that at your door.
Yeah.
Other practical things we had would go for life saving.
Right, of course.
And swimming. And we all went up to Victoria Docks once a week.
Right.
And I had to gain a certificate to say that we are equipped to life save anywhere. But I think life saving in a pond and life saving at sea is slightly different.
Slightly, yes.
As I found out sometimes. But anyway, we had that, and it was very good. And also we had first aid lectures, and we had to get first aid qualifications.
Right.
So it was quite practical in that respect. We had other things about basic ship construction and ship stability to learn about that, about fuel consumption. Very positive.
Yes.
And
Totally.
also thing about the plimsoll line, you see in all ships and the draft of ships, you to learn what they went and what they replied to.
Yeah.
The main one next is the nautical compass, which nowadays they've got them on ships.
Right.
They have to have it as a safety precaution.
Yes.
But it's all done by satellites and goodness knows what nowadays. But we had the box at, north and northeast, you go box around the compass, and you had to know that. And then there was issues about deviation. When a ship's built, all the hammering and banging that goes on in building it, that creates a certain amount of magnetism on the ship. So that deflected the compass. So you had to make allowances for that, and different angles that you were.
So each ship would have had a variation on
the compass, and then there was the variation because the compass goes to the North Pole, which is somewhere in the north of Canada. So there's a deviation there too, and we had to learn all about that and how to apply it.
Yeah.
Then we had to do things like star and planet recognition and look at the galaxies. Yeah. And that, again, was little dots in that blackened out. They put up pictures of it. But now in the one at Julian's Valley, they had a planetarium, so you could look at it as it was.
Wow, that's
so
amazing.
This when you looked that way, that way you looked at that. But anyway, we had to do that. Then we had to learn about latitude, longitude, azimuth, amplitude of the sphere, day and night and clock changes and things like that. There was quite a lot of navigation went on, and the mathematics that was attached to it, things like arithmetic, geometry, triangular and circular trigonometry, logarithms, the theory of them, and the practice, and I've still got a lot of them at home, and algebra, but they were all essential for the navigation.
You see, I remember being terrible at maths and questioning why we needed to learn these things, but you were using them.
You were, yeah, because one of the things I did, one of my slight things, I went back to school, in a uniform, and met some of my ex-colleagues who were doing higher maths. Yeah. And I said, what are you doing about circular navigation? They said, what's that? I said, circular geometry. Yeah. What's that? Even the teacher said, what's that? Oh, I said, well, here. I said, the quickest line on a Mercator chart, it's the one that everybody sees, the oral and that fixed on, it's not a straight line.
Right.
It's a curve.
Of course.
And they said, how do you make that out? Because you cross every line of longitude at the same angle. Right. And if you do that, it goes into a curve. So anyway, that was me getting back at the teacher. But I like maths. I seemed to be quite good at it when I was at school.
You need to be.
Navigation, again, we had to do charts, look at charts, know the chart signs, the symbols, and the correction of courses I've mentioned already. And then how you allowed for tides or coastal currents or whatever, and how you took bearings and for fixing position and things like that. And the use of the sextant.
Of course.
That was very, we had to know how to use it. There was a few samples there, and we eventually, once you became a certificated officer, you had to buy your own. So I still got mine, and that was very, very expensive.
It would be.
And I've still got it. I saw one on Antiques Roadshow the other day, the other month, and wanted £600 for it. So I've got a wee bit there if I get cash. But anyway, the sextant very important, right? Yeah. Then, in addition to that, there was cargo handling, how you got them on board, how you actually stowed it, and where to put it. Because there's no use putting something from here for, say, Cairo at the back of something that was going to put down to other parts of the... And we had to do that when we're coming back as well. We had to rearrange where all the different cargoes came back. However, my first 3 years at sea were on oil tankers. So all you did was open the valve and it went into the thing. Well, there was a way of opening them anyway. So anyway, there's cargo handling and no stowage, and that was very important there. And about ventilation too, because the one cargo I brought into Leith, and one of the ships I was on, was carrots from Cyprus, as well as loads of potatoes. The carrots had gone off because they hadn't been ventilated right, but it all went to pigs. So,
so it wasn't wasted.
Well, it didn't go to Safeways or whatever. Okay, I don't know if it's working for
that's better. Right. Yeah, that's better.
Do you want me to go through cargo handling again?
Actually, it was just to that. Start off from the carrot bit.
Right, okay. When I was talking about ventilation, it's very important to ventilate things like vegetables, potatoes. And on one occasion, we came into Leith with a cargo of potatoes and carrots, which unfortunately hadn't been ventilated as well as should have been, and were declared unfit for human consumption. But the pigs got them, so it wasn't quite a large. It would be, I think. Well, I'm talking about I know where they were. It'd be about the 3 times the area of this room stacked with carrots and bags.
That is a lot.
Yes.
So you'd obviously, that's a point, you'd have people coming in and inspecting.
Oh yes, As soon as you came into port, particularly with everything, in fact, to inspect what it was, because you've a manifest which details everything that you've got in the ship, and And in addition to that, where it came from and how much you've got from who it's destined for, that's all in the manifest in the ship. Nowadays it's people.
Right.
Like the one that's in there just now. The manifest will have all their names on it, and where they get on and where they get off. But anyway, the cargo handling was good and very good training. However, when I went to sea, I went in tankers, as I mentioned, and there's not as much problems with that. It's just you fill big tanks full of oil and take them somewhere else. Now, sometimes you only pumped out at one tank at this place and went somewhere else at that time. Now they tend to be just full and discharge at one place.
All right. So the tanker would have separate tanks?
Yes, and the ones we went on, I think I mentioned previously, was a T2, the Thalapus, my first ship, and one or two others. She had 27 tanks, 9 rows of 3 tanks.
All right.
27. And there was times when you would take maybe several different types of oil on board, so these would go in different areas, and of course all the tanks had to be cleaned and everything. That was a messy job, which was given to the apprentices to do, and usually the bosun. But anyway, we had to learn to write business reports or problem like that thing with the carrots. To write out what happened and do things like that, and then letter writing, basically to make sure you had a CV and everything else you could send to shipping companies.
Of course.
So in addition to all that foregoing stuff, they told us about how to get to sea as well. It wasn't just a case of going there, you fast on a ship.
No.
You have to go through the Shipping Federation first of all, and the Shipping Federation would give you a list of all the companies at that time, most of which are now gone, unfortunately. And how to apply for a course and what to do during an interview. They were very good at helping you along the way for that. Also, we would acquire things like a passport, a seaman's identity card, a discharge book, and various other documentation that we had to have. But that was after, the second term we were given that information. So it went along to the Shipping Fed just at Berners Street, which is now just on the side of we'd hoped to be the museum.
Oh, yes.
It was there, and then writing away for passports and things like that. It was much easier than it is today to get one. You signed up for it, gave them the details, and you got your passport. Like that.
That is easier.
That's good. So anyway, having spent 4 years, a year at the Dolphin and Leith Nautical College, you were given 6 months sea time. Now, that means instead of going for 4 years before you could sit your second mate certificate, you got away with 3.5 years.
Right. Okay.
And I made the 3.5 years with 4 days to spare when I came back to Leith Nautical, which was great, but I accepted it. And by that time I'd been a third mate for a year as well, at the age of almost 19.
God, that's young, isn't it?
Yeah. You never get that nowadays, I don't think. Most of the cadets I come across now are that age anyway, before they go to sea.
Of course.
So anyway, that's a wee bit about Leith and Leith Nautical and the Dolphin and the training we got. If anybody's got anything to like to know more about it.
Yeah. So I mean, were you nervous starting?
Well, when I went there, I was ignorant then at the sea. The nearest we got was Nauutical Loch, and a rowing boat, or the canal if you want, and going swimming there. Yeah. But as I said, my cousin's husband was at sea, so he gave me a few things. With Curry Line, he was just going up and down from here, not just from Leith, over to the Baltic, going around the Baltic ports and coming back with goods. A lot of it was timber, because Leith was famous for timber. Timber and wine, 2 things. So that was. But I went in, I was apprehensive. It was there was the others that were on. There's 12 of us that year as an intake, and they all came from all over Scotland, from the Northern Isles, from Shetland. There was quite a few from Edinburgh, and I want to see now. There was two guys from the Borders, I remember, and two who were brother twins. Two of them twins. They came in and we all went to different companies. The Benline took, being the local company, they took two of them, and one of them didn't even finish his apprenticeship, but he left, went to university, and he was a professor of geography in Edinburgh University. So that was one of them. Others did other things. I mean, that was one went to Canada with the Hudson's Bay Company, and I can't verify this, but I believe he became the president of the Northwest Territories. That's one. Good grief. Another one took up a job on the shore in the Gulf, and that's with the oil industry. And two of them actually became shopkeepers, and then one had a fruit shop on Leith Walk, and the other one was a clothing shop up at Tollcross.
That's a change of career, isn't it?
A tremendous one. I mean, but that's given, not everyone went to sea.
Because it's interesting, you assume people would have had seagoing backgrounds and families, but you didn't, did you? No, sea was where you went for a paddle. If you were lucky. Oh, did you? We always associate these type of things. Were there kind of, not initiation ceremonies, but there were there things that went on?
Not in my experience for any, either the cadets or for the mates tickets. I've got mate. Well, you got second mate, and master, which I've got all three. There was nothing there. It was a case, and there was no celebration about it. You just went along and got it handed to you at the shipping fed. What was it? Was just quite straightforward.
Change days. But there must have been a great camaraderie.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's one thing if you take a ship, right, and there's 26, 30 people on board. That's the crews were a bit that size. You have to get on.
I
mean, it's not like you're 9 to 5 and you go home and see the wife and watch the telly. I mean, it was all done there. And there was a lot of camaraderie in it. And at first, I felt there was a bit of them and us type of thing. So you're a cadet, you don't speak to seamen. And I thought, what? And there was one there, like a young lad I remember who was Malaysian. Right. And I said, you teach me Malay, I'll help you with your English. And he did, but I got a row for it. But anyway, later on, it was mixed a bit more, you know. They all knew your place, but you actually had to mix, or you would cause chaos otherwise.
Because there must have been quite a bit of discipline. Were you okay with that?
Yeah, you actually had... if there was anything that the skipper didn't like, or if they got drunk and came back and couldn't work, there was a process whereby pay was deducted for the time they didn't work, all that. But most people were actually... It wasn't a case of you will do or I will do. No. We'd say, well, we're going into harbour, can get the crews and, fore and aft for the ropes and things like that. You see, everybody just turned out to do their job. And you did it in watches anyway. You had a watch. When I was the mate, there was you and three others, the seamen actually attached. And the same for the other two officers, that had three attached to your watch. One was on the steering, one was on the bow at night for seeking if there's other ships coming, and one on standby, and they changed every hour round, and that was the same routine. And of course, a ship's bell's more than just a tinkle thing that gives you the time, the 8 bells, and they would change over at each hour. So everybody did that, and it was the same in the engine room, because they had the engineers and also the firemen. They worked the same sort of system there. Cooks and stewards, they were all right. They got up at 6 in the morning and brought you up a cup of tea or whatever in the morning, and if you were on the 48 watch, it was great. And then they had their meals over the day, and everything was spotless at night, and they would go off to bed at 10 o'clock.
Oh, very civilised.
Yeah.
It's all right for them.
Well, the Dolphin used to be used for catering courses, very good. Oh, and there's a little tale I'll tell you about that, but very short.
Yeah.
When you came back to do your mate's tickets at the college, there was a couple of pubs nearby if you wanted to do that, but they actually provided meals on the Dolphin. That's what the cook had cooked that day, and you go there, and they always had it, and they had, at the end of it, you got two biscuits, and a bit cheese, and the steward, the head steward used to say, that is your ration, 2 biscuits per man per day.
Well, you're not getting big fat on that, was it?
No, the food was good, the produce. So, it's a community, and that you had to work together.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leith Lives. Check out the others in the series. There's Gordon Munro talking about his childhood memories of Leith. Maureen Sweeney about working in Leith, particularly in the bonds. Frank Condy and his time at Henry Robb Shipyard. There are also 2 more episodes from Anrew Grant where he looks at World War I and Leith.